sea to shining sea.
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I want to welcome you to the year 2015. I anticipate it's going to be a great year, so I think it's time for us to get started.
City Clerk certifies publication on the Daily Record on January 2nd. Notes for pre-council and regular City Council meeting January 6, 2015. Current copy of opening execs posted in a white binder on the east wall of the legislative chambers.
Good afternoon and welcome to the Omaha City Council. This meeting is conducted in public and by law may only address the topics listed on the published agenda. The council will hear testimony but will not engage in debate of issues with the public at this meeting. During testimony, it's not appropriate to applaud or convey disapproval. These actions only detract from the formal decorum of the meeting. At this time, please turn off or mute any electronic devices.
Zoning ordinance on final reading and planning board attachments. Item number 5, ordinance to rezone property at 402.5 William Street from General Industrial District to R6 Medium Family Residential District Low Density. A, Planning Board and Planning Department recommend approval.
Public hearing on number 5 is today. Are there any proponents? Seeing none, any opponents? Public hearing is closed. Roll call.
Milton.
Yes.
Pauls.
Yes.
Thompson.
Yes.
Gurnett.
Yes.
Gray. Jerem. Yes. Mr. President.
Yes.
5 is passed 7-0. Item number 6, ordinance to rezone property located at 1015 North 14th Street from Heavy Industrial District to Central Business District. Property is also located within an ACI 1 PL area of civic importance overlay district. A, Planning Board and Planning Department recommend approval.
Public hearing number 6 is today. Are there any proponents? Mr. Heiston.
Todd Heaston, New Style Development, 2223 Dodge Street. Just here to answer any questions that you may have on the rezoning. This will be 75 apartments next to the hot shop, so trying to keep some good low rents for kind of the artist area.
Great. Thank you. Any other proponents? Any opponents? Public hearing is closed.
Second.
Roll call.
Milton.
Yes.
Pauls.
Yes.
Thompson.
Yes.
Gurnett.
Yes.
Gray. Jerem. Mr. President.
Yes.
6 is passed 7-0. Item 7, ordinance to rezone property located at 2505 Bancroft Street from General Industrial District to R4 Single Family Residential District High Density. A, Planning Board and Planning Department recommend approval.
Public hearing on number 7 is today. Are there any proponents? Seeing none, any opponents? Public hearing is closed. Roll call.
Milton.
Yes.
Pauls.
Yes.
Thompson.
Yes.
Gurnett.
Yes.
Gray. Jerem. Mr. President.
Yes.
7 is passed 7-0. Item number 8, ordinance to rezone property located at 2519 South 26th Street from General Industrial District to R4 Single Family Residential District High Density. A, Planning Board, Planning Department recommend approval.
Public hearing on number 8 is today. Are there any proponents? Any opponents?
Motion to approve.
Public hearing is closed. Roll call.
Milton.
Yes.
Pauls.
Yes.
Thompson.
Yes.
Gurnett.
Yes.
Gray. Jerem. Mr. President.
Yes.
8 is passed 7-0. Item number 9, ordinance to approve a major amendment to a mixed-use development agreement for Alltech Business Park to allow the construction of a 50-foot-high broadcast tower located at 4002 South 149th Circle. A, Planning Board and Planning Department recommend approval.
Public hearing on number 9 is today. Are there any proponents? Any opponent? Oh, please. Yeah.
I'm sorry, I didn't quite give notice. I'm a proponent.
Proponent? Please. Yeah.
My name is Mark Kohler. I work with SMJ on behalf of Verizon, and this is for the allowance of a 50-foot broadcast tower on property that Verizon currently owns and has owned at this location since 2004. The location is a major switching facility for the mobile phone network, and we consider it an appropriate use of our property there. And we request your support, and I'm here for any questions you might have.
Great.
We worked closely with planning staff to come in with an acceptable solution.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
Any other proponents today? Any opponents?
Hi, my name is Bruno Roger. I'm an embedded software engineer, and I'm concerned with this tower that will be some health issues.
And your address, please?
Sorry?
And your address, for the record?
14933 G Street, so I'm supposed to be within 300 feet from the tower. So I'm really familiar with electronics testing. I've been involved with cell phone testing back in Europe. And what I know behind the scene, I don't want it to have next to my house. So not only the health issues that could be related to the tower, but also some safety issues. When you have a 50-foot tower, it's a ladder for kids that could climb on it. I'm really against this tower in our neighborhood.
Thank you. So is that a French accent?
Yes, I'm French.
All right, very good.
Yes.
Thanks. Other opponents, please.
My name is David Wentworth. I live at 14924 G Street. I back up directly into this property. I was not available to talk at your first meeting on this because I was out of town on business. I've lived in that house for 22 years. I'm one of the fifth house built in Williamsburg. It's the Colonies. When I purchased the house, I specifically purchased my lot because there was a sod farm behind me. And I thought I'd have a great view. 15 years ago, the city council and Ted Grace with Alltech decided to rezone because it was purchased for the purpose of building on that site. As homeowners of Williamsburg at the Colonies, we came down before that city council multiple times. The meetings kept getting moved and postponed and so forth to come to an agreement with the property. That agreement with Ted Grace, when we allowed him to purchase and work with the property, was that Ted agreed with the Homeowners Association that it was going to be MULI, so that we could see what the buildings would look like, what the landscape would look like outside our back doors. Further into the park, the Alltech Park, it was going to be for regular industrial use. Further away so it would not obstruct us, height restrictions and so forth. Through that, Ted Grace agreed that we would allow the MULI zoning. He also put us on his board of covenants so that we would be aware of what was going on within the property, so that, because as homeowners. And so I want to give you a little history as to what happened with that property and what we agreed to with the city council 15 years ago when it was first built. You now have before you a request to build a cell tower and to rezone part of the agreement that we had with the city council and Ted Grace for the property that is adjacent to our homes. As far as I'm concerned, the people of Verizon bought that property in 2004 knowing good and well that it was an MULI property. Now they have decided that they want to change the zoning. Further into the park, the Alltech Business Park, are lots where a cell tower can be built. It is zoned for that because it's further back from the families. And all I am requesting is that you consider and that they consider placing the tower on a properly zoned lot versus taking the lot that they purchased 10 years ago and rezoning it. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other opponents today? Seeing none, does the proponent want to respond to anything he's heard there before we close public hearing? You have some questions?
Just on the safety concerns.
Your name again, just for the record.
Is Mark Kohler. And safety concerns as for like children climbing the tower. The whole property is highly secured. There's a perimeter wall that goes around. It's got controlled gate access. The compound itself, where the tower would be located, would be further fenced off and anti-climbing devices involved. As for radio frequencies, I believe they've been deemed safe by the FCC, and I don't know if those can even be brought up in a hearing because they have been determined by the government to be safe. As for locating further north, where we could locate without a zoning change, we're talking about additional costs for us having to go off our own property and possible larger utility costs to locate where we have everything we need right where we're at. Other considerations, of course, is we're on our property, so we wouldn't have to be leasing from someone else. And then the basic height of the tower, which we've, scaled back as far as we can. When you're dealing with that short of a tower, location is everything. And, even a few blocks can affect what you're trying to cover. So I'd like to address those points and any other questions you folks might have.
Great, thank you. Public hearing is closed. Mr. Thompson.
Sir, if you could stay there.
Okay, sure.
I was a little confused about one of your answers. If you could just clarify it for me. If you did move it back into the property, and by saying into the property, is that more
I'm
south?
talking the subdivision rather than the Verizon property. This is located in basically about the center of the Verizon property, so it's a relative distance from the property lines, especially from any of the residential that is to the south.
Would that be a southward movement from where you want it now?
To where is zoned industrial, the gentleman was talking about, within this general area, it is more toward the north and I think slightly east.
Northeast.
Yeah.
If you were to locate it there, would you have to pay a lease?
Yes, we would have to be going to somebody else rather than use our own property.
Okay. And who owns that property?
I believe is it Ted Grace, I believe.
Okay.
Still owns that property up there.
All right. When it's no way that I can fault you, but somehow we've got to do a better job of being able to make records available so that promises that are made to citizens long ago somehow are kept, down the road. And this isn't the first time it's happened. It's happened several times that I can think of. And I'm not sure we can punish you for that, but we've got to find a better way of being able to do that, because citizens, when they hear promises made at this pulpit here, podium, they think it's gold. And,
yeah, absolutely.
So I have a feeling for what the gentleman is saying, but at the same time, I'm not sure if you should take the brunt of that, but I'll yield the floor right now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Pauls.
Thank you, Mr. President. Could I have someone from planning talk to me on this issue? I had a question about this, the height of this tower, and it was pointed out to me that actually it's a relatively small tower. Is that true?
James Hill City Planning. It's a 49-foot tower with a 1-foot extension for antenna. So it's a 50-foot, I say lightning rod. It's a 50-foot tower total.
Okay. How close, how far is it off of F Street? Do you have any idea of this? Because the houses are on the other side of F Street, with the individuals talking about the subdivision. And I was just wondering, I am a little bit concerned. I wasn't on the council then, but if we sort of let people think that the future, that this is going to, things like this will not happen, I'm a little bit suspect, because I would think the planning department would have had some idea about that, and I wasn't told about that.
James Thiel, Councilman. The City Council approved a major amendment, or approved a mixed-use development agreement. I think that is the agreement that is being referred to. City's not really a party to that agreement in terms of those conditions that may be on there regarding broadcast towers. That was part of that development agreement. So what you have before you now is an amendment to that redevelopment agreement. So it is publicly being brought before the City Council and before the public that there is a request to amend this agreement with the developer in order to allow the broadcast tower. It's not prohibited in terms of zoning, it's prohibited in terms of the subdivision agreement.
Okay, since this is a major amendment, that's the reason why it's coming in front of this body right now. This is a major amendment. That's what you're telling me.
That is correct. The mixed-use agreement specifies what can and can't be used on that specific lots within that subdivision. This is a change to that agreement.
Okay, so the citizen is correct. By this council making a major amendment, we are actually changing what the council had established in the past with what he is understanding.
That is correct.
So, okay, I'm just trying to make, so if we do not approve this major amendment, we would be going back to what the previous council had established, is what you're telling me.
That is correct. However, the law department may have a comment regarding cell towers and the requirements related to a city as it controls the location of cell towers.
Could I, you're telling me I should ask for that opinion?
I think Mr. Kratz is going to respond.
Okay.
Paul Kratz, City Attorney. Under federal rules, under federal law, there are limitations on what the City Council can do as far as restricting cell towers. I can't tell you exactly what the requirements are as far as what he can use, but simply not liking it in a particular location is not one of those reasons. Simply not liking the design of it or the looks of it does not satisfy the federal law.
Okay, so in other words, you're telling me we really do not have a choice in this if we're going to follow the federal guidelines.
If you follow the federal guidelines, that's correct. If you don't and don't approve the major amendment, the city would be susceptible to being sued under those regulations.
Okay, thank you.
If it can be proven there's a service deficiency, right, in the area?
That's correct. That's part of one of the requirements is that there's a service deficiency and they need to locate this tower at that particular location.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Thompson.
Yes, Mr. President, I remember we had a case, I believe it might have been right when you came on council, or it could have been right before, but it was out in the 160th and about Blondo area. And I remember we struggled with this question quite a bit, and we had to acquiesce because there would have been a hole that we created if we didn't let that tower go there. And is there anyone in planning that could address that now? Would not having this tower in this location create a communications hole or not fill a hole? Is there anyone in planning that?
James Steele, Planning Department. I'm looking through the documentation here. I don't see a coverage map, but there's indication in our analysis that it is necessary for coverage.
Would you come up, sir?
Okay, this is, we can see it there.
Go ahead and state your name.
Oh, okay. It's Mark Kohler again, representing Verizon. Let me make sure I get my... This is... Let's see if I have that about right side up. This is the site generally, and yellow is good coverage. If we're white, we're kind of borderline coverage. And this is the location of the site, so you can see. There's a hill here, considerable difference in elevation. So we're just trying to get to the top of that hill and then fill in the rest here. And this is a coverage site. It's a little bit better with a red dot.
So with the tower there, then you improve the coverage.
Yeah, we improve the coverage around. The coverage is improved, and probably one of the biggest things, and you're going to hear this going forward, is capacity. Because, you know, it's just skyrocketing with smartphones and such, is capacity. And capacity is really the same as coverage. If your phone doesn't work, your phone doesn't work. So a lot of it is capacity, too.
Okay. Thank you very much, sir.
Yep, you're welcome.
Mr. Wentworth, I have feelings for what you're saying, but when it comes to a municipality going up against the federal guidelines, we've tried that before, and we've lost miserably on more than one occasion. So even though I have feelings for what it is you're fighting for, I don't think this body has the ability to go against what the coverages are. Did you want to make a comment, sir?
Yes, David Wentworth, homeowner again. The question is he showed a map where there's a void from a cell tower. Does it matter if the cell tower is 200 feet or 700 feet into that property? There's going to still be a cell tower in that property. That's my point. Okay. You can have your cell tower, just not so close to the homes. And you knew that when you bought the property, that we have a multi-use. We're supposed to know what's supposed to go there. It's supposed to be aesthetically pleasing. The buildings were supposed to be designed so that we could, you know, what we had there. We didn't want an industrial park right outside our back doors. That was agreed to. That's what we went to. I don't have a problem with the cell tower on that property, just not within 200 feet of my house. 600-700 feet into the property where it belongs, where it's zoned, that's fine.
Thank you very much, sir.
Motion and a second. Mr. Pauls.
Just have one question. Could I have someone from the law department speak to on this issue?
Sure, Paul Kratz.
Okay, Paul, I understand you say that, we're fighting the federal government, but what about moving, not saying you can't have the tower, but if you would move it, would we be in the guidelines, or are we still playing with the federal government?
We still have that issue with the federal regulations, but I think some of what you heard earlier is if you move it, you're moving it on somebody else's property, which is going to add an additional cost to Verizon. And then secondly, you'd have to look at a different coverage map. It may or may not make much difference. I don't know.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. No further lights. There's a motion and a second. Roll call.
Milton?
Yes.
Pauls?
No.
Thompson?
Yes.
Gurnett?
Yes.
Gray?
Yes.
Jerem?
Yes.
Mr. President?
Yes.
It's adopted 6-1, or passed 6-1. Pursuant to City Council Rules 7H, due to no meeting being held January 20th, agenda items number 10 through 12 shall be laid over 3 weeks to January 27th for publication and public hearing. Pursuant to City Council Rules 7H, agenda item number 13 shall be laid over 3 weeks to January 27th. Liquor, item number 14. Flavors Indian Cuisine, 1901 Farnham Street, Class C liquor license application, new location.
Now we're combining these public hearings?
No, that's 14. 15 and 16 were combined.
Okay, thank you. Public hearing number 14 is today. Proponents, please. Please come down.
Good afternoon. My name is Srinivas Nimagadda. I'm resident of 12812 Bird Street, Omaha, Nebraska. I'm owner of Flavors Food Cuisine in the downtown area. and the restaurant has been in the business for more than a year, and we would like to offer alcohol beverages to our customers.
Thanks. Just across the street, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Great. Thank you. Any other proponents? Any opponents? Public hearing's closed. Roll call.
Milton.
Yes.
Pauls.
Yes.
Thompson.
Yes.
Gurnett.
Yes.
Gray.
Yes.
Jerem.
Yes.
Mr. President.
Yes.
It's adopted 7-0. Now we'll take items 15 and 16 for one public hearing, but we have to vote on them individually because they're amendments. 15 is Parker's Smokehouse, Omaha, 7425 Pacific Street, Class C liquor license, no application, no location. We need to have an amendment to include the outdoor area. 16 is a catering license for the same applicant, same location. We need an amendment for that as well.
Thank you. Public hearing on number 15 and 16 are today. Proponents, please.
Mr. President, members of the council, my name is Mike Reardon. I'm an attorney in Lincoln. I represent the applicants here, Jeff and Emily Parker and their LLC. Currently, the applicants have 5 existing liquor licenses, one in Ashland, one in Lincoln, one in Nebraska City, and Mahoney Grill out at Mahoney State Park, and they did have a location at Branched Oak, which is no longer functioning. But I'm telling you that because of the background they have. They sure have proven their expertise in the area, and I believe that the application meets all of the requirements of the Nebraska Liquor Control Act, and I would attempt to answer any questions you might have of me.
Thank you. Other proponents today? See none. Any opponents? Public hearing is closed. Mr. Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. President. Is Jeff and Emily Parker here?
No, they're not.
Okay. Could I have you come back, sir? I'd like to go on record as saying that the business that you were replacing was there for a long time and did good business. One of the things that they did was have live music. Do you think that that will continue?
I'm not certain. I will certainly mention that to them and that you brought that up, but I can't say for certain that they're going to continue that.
If they do, the self-contained music inside the building works well, but I would like for you not to put a speaker outside because there are apartment buildings close by. As long as you don't have outside speakers, then the music is not a problem. And then also the outdoor smoking / eating worked out well too. It's not a rowdy crowd that went there, and so well-behaved, conservative crowd. And if you're able to say that they won't have speakers outside for music, then I'm willing to endorse this.
I think on behalf of the Parkers, I can say that, and I would certainly encourage them not to have speakers.
Okay. And are they going to continue the same barbecue theme?
Yes.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
great.
Yep.
That just fills that void real good then. I heard a couple of people in the neighborhood saying we wish it would reopen, so I'm glad that you're doing it. With that, I'll move the approval. For the amendment.
Thank you.
Approval for the amendment.
There's a motion and a second. Mr. Pauls.
And I just want to relieve anybody of any concerns, because on many of my trips to Lincoln, I've stopped on the other side between two small towns and had many good meals at that place. So I think you're going to be a welcome addition to the city of Omaha here. Thank you.
Thank you. There's a motion on the amendment. Roll call.
Milton.
Yes.
Pauls.
Yes.
Thompson.
Yes.
Gurnett.
Yes.
Gray.
Yes.
Jerem. Mr. President.
Yes.
As amended.
Second.
Roll call.
Milton.
Yes.
Pauls.
Yes.
Thompson.
Yes.
Gurnett.
Yes.
Gray.
Yes.
Jerem. Mr. President.
Yes.
And now 16, the amendment.
Move the amendment. Second.
Roll call.
Milton.
Yes.
Pauls.
Yes.
Thompson.
Yes.
Gurnett.
Yes.
Gray.
Yes.
Jerem. Mr. President.
Yes.
As amended. Second.
Roll call.
Milton.
Yes.
Pauls.
Yes.
Thompson.
Yes.
Gurnett.
Yes.
Gray.
Yes.
Jerem. Mr. President.
Yes.
Both of them were adopted as amended, 7-0. Item number 17, a couple things, drive-through 6221 Center Street, package liquor license application, new location.
Public hearing on number 17 is today. Proponents, please.
Good afternoon, Mr. President, members of the council. I'm Rob Gage. I'm here with Mike Sartori, the owner of Lotto Inc.
Great. Thank you. Any other proponents today? Any opponents? Mr. Jerem.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Gage, we had an opportunity to speak before the council meeting, and I shared with you my desire to lay this over for a week to allow time to get some feedback from the Neighborhood Association and UNO and Exarban Future Trust. And it's my understanding you don't have an issue with that, and that you will, if they request, you will be willing to meet with them to discuss the business operation and what you have in mind.
Absolutely. I've discussed the same with Mr. Sartori, and we'll be available all week. And don't oppose that. Certainly want to engage the community to see if there's any concerns or issues prior to the council's vote.
Okay, thank you. That would be my motion.
Second. I can say the public hearing, right? Second. Motion and a second. Roll call.
Milton. Pauls.
Yes.
Thompson.
Yes.
Gurnett.
Yes.
Gray.
Yes.
Jerem.
Yes.
Mr. President.
Yes.
Laid over 1 week, 7-0. Consent agenda. Any member of City Council may cause an item placed on the consent agenda to be removed. Items removed consent agenda shall be taken up by City Council immediately following the consent agenda in the order in which they were removed unless otherwise provided by City Council Rules of Order.
Public hearings on agenda items number 18 through 21 were held on December 16th. Second. Roll call.
Milton.
Yes.
Pauls.
Yes.
Thompson.
Yes.
Gurnett.
Yes.
Gray. Jerem. Mr. President.
Yes.
18 to 21 are passed, 7-0.
The public hearings on agenda items number 22 through 35 are today. If you wish to address the City Council regarding these items, please come to the microphone, indicate the agenda item number you wish to address, identify yourself by name, address, who you represent, and if you are a proponent or an opponent. Seeing none, public hearings are closed.
Second.
Roll call.
Milton. Pauls.
Yes.
Thompson.
Yes.
Gurnett.
Yes.
Gray. Jerem. Mr. President.
Yes.
22 through 35 are adopted, 7-0. Resolutions. Item number 36, resolution that the Detroit Security National Bank increment financing, tax increment financing redevelopment project plan for the site located at 3504, 3512 Farnham Street, contemplating the demolition of the existing branch bank and the construction of a new branch bank and a IT Operations Center, community rooms is hereby approved.
Public hearing number 36 is today. Proponents, please. Ms. Hadley.
Good afternoon, Bridget Hadley, City Planning. Before you is a redevelopment project of a local bank that has decided to reinvest in the area of Midtown. Before you in the red and the blue is the existing site as it stands. Here is the existing bank branch. This particular project will allow them to completely demolish the existing bank branch and build a much larger branch that will, as stated before, include a community room as well as a larger space for the bank branch in the retail space. It will also decrease the number of access points that there are to this site and reduce it down to basically 2. Here is what is proposed as the new site plan layout. This project will also allow it to pay for 21 diagonal parking spaces along Farnham Street and reduce it down to these basically 3 access points. There's the operations room, the community room, and then the bank branch. This particular project also involves the retention of 30 FTEs as well as the addition of 12 new jobs, FTEs at this site. A majority of the TIF, which is a little over $500,000, $505,000, goes to the public improvements so that is surrounding the site. So the streetscaping along 35th Avenue and 35th Street, as well as the public improvements, as well as demolition costs, take up a majority of the TIF. The project does involve $6 million in total project costs, a little over $6 million. And again, does involve reinvestment into this particular area, a prominent area in Midtown. So with that, I would ask for your approval.
Thank you. Any other proponents today? Seeing none, any opponents? Public hearing is closed. Mr. Thompson.
Yes, even though in the past I've had questions about some of our TIF projects, I believe this one fits the original intention of what we were trying to accomplish. The age of the building, the fact that it's in an area where we really need to redevelop, it's urban infill, and at the same time job creation. So if this particular project did come under scrutinization, I think it would pass. And so I'm all for TIF when it's for the right thing, and this seems to be a perfect example of what it should be. So if Councilman Jerem don't mind, I'll go ahead and move the approval.
Thank you. Mr. Jerem.
Yes, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, the investment that Security National Bank's making here is just one aspect of their community efforts in Omaha, and all that the bank has done and the family that owns it to contribute not only in a conspicuous way like this, but in several philanthropic endeavors that they've supported as a family for generations now in Omaha. And to think that their investment in the Blackstone district will create an additional 12 jobs beyond the 30-some that are already there, and add on street parking to a part of the city that needs it, all on basically carried by them over the 15-year term of the note, is commendable, and I'm happy to support it and look forward to your continued involvement in the community.
Thank you. I'd also note that Mr. Landon is here. We appreciate him being here as well as his investment. And I can tell you that Councilman Jerem and I were at a Midtown Business Association meeting recently over the holidays, and everybody there was sure excited to get this project going because it is another great anchor there for the Blackstone Business District. So with no further lights, motion and a second, roll call.
Milton?
Yes.
Pauls?
Yes.
Thompson?
Yes.
Gurnett?
Yes.
Gray? Jerem?
Yes.
Mr. President?
Yes.
36 is adopted 7-0. Pursuant to City Council Rule 7F, agenda item number 37 should be laid over 3 weeks for publication and public hearing. Pursuant to City Council Rule 7D, the public hearing on agenda items 38 through 44 shall be held on the third reading. Ordinance on second reading, item number 45, ordinance authorizing acceptance of the bid from Papillion Sanitation for rubbish container services at various Omaha Police Department facilities.
Public hearing on number 45 is today. Proponents, please. Seeing none, any opponents? Public hearing is closed.
Item number 46, ordinance to approve a contract with the UNMC Physicians for the Emergency Medical Care Services Program for the Fire Department.
Public hearing on number 46 is today. Proponents, please. Any opponents? Public hearing is closed.
Item number 47, ordinance to approve an agreement with Douglas County Board of Commissioners on behalf of the Douglas County Attorney's Office to provide partial funding for one part-time gang and gun prosecutor in the Violent Crime Gang Gun Prosecution Unit.
Public hearing on number 47 is today. Are there any proponents? Any opponents? Public hearing is closed.
Item number 48, ordinance to approve a collective bargaining agreement for the years 2013, 14, 15, 16, and 17 with Omaha City Employees Local 251.
Public hearing on number 48 is today. Proponents, please. Mr. McQueen.
Good afternoon. Happy New Year to all of you. My name is Mark McQueen. I work with the law firm of Baird Holm, and as you know, I served as the lead negotiator on behalf of the city for this particular set of negotiations and all the other ones that have been occurring in 2014. Wanted to just very briefly summarize the highlights of this agreement, but before getting into that, even more briefly, thank a couple people who deserve appreciation and thanks. First and foremost, Steve Kerrigan, who I partnered with throughout these negotiations and whose input and counsel and guidance was very instrumental in reaching this tentative agreement. So thank you, Steve. Also, I wanted to extend some special thanks to the bargaining committee and the union leadership for Local 251, President Kevin Brown and Vice President Don Hembry, who I think is here in the audience today, worked very, very hard among the 3 civilian unions who were involved in negotiations in 2014. These folks led the pack in reaching an agreement, and one of the reasons why the agreement took as long as it did, and of course everybody feels it took plenty long and longer than we would all like, is because we're dealing with some extremely difficult pension issues and a need to reform the current pension plan, and a need to fix an underfunded pension plan. And Don Embry and Kevin Brown, on behalf of Local 251, stepped up. They made very difficult decisions in that regard, and they deserve thanks and appreciation for their efforts, and I wanted to make special note of that. In terms of the specifics of the agreement, very quickly, and if I move too quickly, or if you would like more particular detail, in particular on the pension issues, please let me know. I'll provide as much detail as possible, but just the overview and the highlights. It's a 5-year deal. That deal starts in 2013 and runs through 2017. Obviously, we're 2 years into that as of this particular date, so it's 3 years prospectively, 5 years in total. The most significant change, as I mentioned earlier, has to do with the pension. We made 2 significant pension changes. One of those changes impacting current employees. Those current employees will remain in the current defined benefit pension plan, but that plan has been modified in a significant way so that future years of service for all plan participants are less valuable to them for purposes of future pension benefits than past years of service. In addition, current employees will have to work longer in order to achieve normal retirement age than was the case before this agreement. If you'd like the specific concessions made by Local 251 by which they give up pension benefits and work longer to earn those pension benefits, just let me know and I'll walk you through those specific changes. But that's it in a nutshell: less benefits and working longer in order to achieve those benefits. Future employees, on the other hand, will participate in an entirely new pension plan, one that hasn't ever been implemented in the city of Omaha. You've been briefed on it multiple occasions over the last 12 months in a short form that's known as a cash balance pension plan. It walks and talks a lot like a 401k plan, but it is technically considered still a defined benefit pension plan under the IRS regulations. In a nutshell, the reason for the cash balance plan is it helps the city eliminate the current unfunded liability, and it makes future unfunded liability far less likely because of the manner in which the cash balance plan is structured. So what we've done with revising the current plan for current employees and creating an entirely new plan for future employees is we've flipped on its head the current unfunded liability problem. Right now, underfunded to the tune of a little over $200 million and actuarially projected to be insolvent in a little over 20 years. With these particular negotiated changes, the plan is actuarially projected to reach fully funded status in a little over 20 years. And you have all no doubt been involved in some of the discussions and been concerned about the bond rating for the city of Omaha, driven in part by unfunded liability. The bond raters wanted us to develop negotiated fixes to the pension plan and the unfunded liability in under 30 years, and we've done that in this particular case. So again, a major task when we started it. Major credit due to the collective bargaining representatives representing the employees, and good news for the pension fund if this agreement is ratified by the city council. What sort of concessions did the city make in order to achieve these benefits and this long-term contract? In the area of city contributions to the pension plan, we agreed to an additional 7% of contributions. They're staggered in and scheduled to take effect over the course of 3 years over the 5-year contract term. Those additional 7% in pension contributions are all covered and through set-asides through prior budgets, so there is no new funds required here that haven't already been budgeted for in years past and in the upcoming year. In addition, in the area of wages, over the 5-year contract term, we agreed to a 9% increase in base rates, so a little under 2% per year. In 2013, in order in part to finance some of the pension contributions that I just mentioned, we negotiated a base rate freeze, but we also negotiated a one-time lump sum wage supplement on non-overtime earnings. So you've got, on base rates, you've got 9% over the course of 5 years, consolidated or combined with a 1% wage supplement that doesn't impact base rates in 2013. One other wage-related, fairly minor issue that bears mentioning, we agreed in 2016, 1 year from now, to increase the current shift differentials for those that work second or third shifts in the city of Omaha by the amount of 10 cents per hour. Finally, in the area of medical insurance, you are no doubt aware that the Local 251 and all the civilian employees are currently on the standard city health insurance plan. They're where the city wanted them to be. But given the length of this particular contract and the fact that it will be in effect for another 3 years, we included into this tentative agreement the right by either party to reopen negotiations on health insurance and health insurance only in 2015 for changes to take effect no earlier than January of 2016. Now, neither party has to exercise that right. Both parties have the right to reopen negotiations, and if either party reopens negotiations, it doesn't obligate the other party to do anything other than to bargain in good faith. And if negotiations are reopened, it does not impact any other term of the contract. So it would be a discussion on health insurance and health insurance exclusively if either party exercises their contract reopening right. And we've got a lot of language changes that we've negotiated in there, and you've got access to that through the material provided by the City Legal Department, so I don't want to emphasize those particular points, not that they're important, but they're not economic highlights, so I've chosen to limit my comments to the economic highlights that I've just mentioned. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to address those now, and again, would hope that you can support this tentative agreement as the membership already has from Local 251.
Thank you for that overview. I think we probably will have some questions for you. Any other proponents today that want to speak? Seeing none, any opponents? Public hearing's closed. We got a couple lights on there. Is your light still on? Okay. Mr. Jerem.
Mr. McQueen, in terms of the contract, is there anything in terms of drop or akin to what the sworn officers have implemented in their...
No.
In terms of the funding formula for correcting the unfunded pension liability, is the formula, in addition to the conversion of the cash balance plan for new hires, akin to what we did with police and fire in terms of continuing a rate of pay in on the new hires that exceeds what the actual liability is for their cash balance plan to help fund the UAL?
That is a fact. So what's going to happen is the city will continue to contribute for new hires exactly the same amount that the city is contributing for current employees, even though that exact amount exceeds what the benefit will be for the new hires. The excess amount is being used to reduce that unfunded liability, along with the benefit cuts that the employees have agreed to.
What is the date of hire upon which that triggers the employees who will be on the cash balance plan?
March 1st, 2015.
It's my understanding there'll be an amendment of the whole that's coming down the line as well to allow existing employees roughly 2.5 months or so till March to contemplate whether to exercise a retirement option or to kind of figure out what the financial implications are to the individual employee.
That's exactly correct. Originally, we contemplated a trigger date of January 1st, 2015, and that date is obviously passed, but the date, due to how this approval process worked, was going to come upon the employees very, very quickly. So the decision was made to afford employees a little extra time to consider their future retirement plans, and so we pushed back the effective date of the pension changes to March 1st.
With police and fire, I believe there was an evaluation done in terms of fully pension-eligible people who could retire, and I know it's different here because for the people who are employed, they have 2.25% of pay times their number of years of service. I forget what is the after 5 years you're vested.
Correct. There's a rule of 80, if that's what you're referring
Yes.
to, at a minimum retirement age, or
Yes.
normal retirement age of age 60.
Has there been an assessment in this case in terms of who would be eligible in terms of numbers of employees? So in terms of HR planning, what may need to be filled if assuming worst case scenario happens?
Yeah, and I think this is, I mean, has that issue been considered? Yes. Is there a sense that there's going to be an employee drain as a result of these pension terms? No. There may be some employees who exit, but this is a far different animal than what you dealt with the sworn employees, where the changes for current employees are not quite so drastic. And of course, the pension formula is different as well. And I think Mr. Kerrigan might be in a better position to address the head count issues and what he, as a member of the Human Resource Department, expects in terms of employee attrition. But my sense was there was no serious concern about some rush out the door as a result of these changes. Matter of fact, we tried very hard to avoid any extreme hardship for folks who have worked their entire career to get to retirement age.
We heard this morning from Mr. Kerrigan, and perhaps you can just tell us a little bit of how this will work in light of what I would call the recent episode with the police union in terms of exercising a right for a one-year extension. I'm told that there is a one-year rollover language that's similar to what police had, and that, so as I understand it, that would be sometime in 17?
Correct.
What specifically would be the date that either side would have to notify the other in order to trigger or prevent the trigger of the automatic rollover for 18?
Oh, well, a timely notice, and I don't have the contract in front of me at this juncture, and I don't remember off the top of my head in this particular contract when the notice was due, but it is universally present in collective bargaining agreements for the parties to agree on a particular date that predates the expiration of the contract, by which either party notifies the other of their intention to reopen negotiations. What you're referring to in the police with the police union was an unprecedented argument and position that was taken, unprecedented in the sense of neither union nor city had ever taken such a position historically in this city, and in my 25 years of negotiating contracts have ever taken such a position. I realize there's some uncertainty with respect to the police union and the litigation that's still pending on the interpretation of that particular contract provision, but we don't expect any sort of similar argument to be made by the civilians. But there's a simple fix to it, and that's just provide timely notice. Normally, notices are issued by the collective bargaining agents. They have an interest in reopening negotiations because they want to change their wages. We faced a fairly unusual circumstance with the police union where they were motivated to not reopen negotiations for fear of the consequences that might result if we did engage in collective bargaining.
And I shared this morning with Mr. Kerrigan, but perhaps you can do it here for the public meeting. I had an inquiry asking whether the contract or the negotiations included discussion of or any agreement with regard to extending health and pension benefits to same-sex domestic partners, whether married or in a state that recognizes that or not. And Mr. Kerrigan had said that it never came up. The union never requested it, and it wasn't offered. If I'm summarizing what he said, is that accurate?
Yeah, it is accurate. I want to expand on that just a little bit because sometimes there's a confusion between a standard, what we refer to as an EEO clause in a contract, an equal employment opportunity clause, and eligibility for health insurance. With respect to the non-discrimination or the EEO clause in the Local 251 contract, we did modify that clause to include sexual orientation as a protected class. In other words, the city agreed contractually not to discriminate on the basis of sexual orientation. We did not agree, nor did either party propose to extend medical insurance benefits to same-sex partners in the Local 251 negotiations. Now, that has been a subject of active dialogue in some of the other bargaining units. We've not reached an agreement with any of those other bargaining units on that particular provision. But I would remind you, however, that either side retains the right to reopen negotiations on health insurance in 2015 for changes that may take effect in 2016. If either side opens on that particular issue, my expectation is the extension of same-sex health insurance benefits will be a subject of conversation.
Okay. Is it a subject to either of the TA with the functional or SEMTEC? Tentative agreements?
No.
Okay.
It was a subject of dialogue with the SEMTEC union that did not result in a tentative agreement and is not part of any of the agreements that we reached with the three civilian bargaining units.
And then in terms of economics, what is the percent over the life of the 5 years of the raise in pay for the Local 251 members?
9% over 5 years.
And does that exclude the shift differential?
It does.
And does it exclude the compensation for the past year that had a wage supplement?
It does. Because that 1% wage supplement does not impact base rates.
One of the things that we're frequently asked at meetings like this is what percentage of this city charter amendment, or the city charter that has language that says basically there has to be substantially equal contributions, and there's frequently an assessment made actuarially as to how much the city's paying in versus what the employees are paying in, whether in cash or diminution in benefits. Has that been done in this case?
There was an actuarial calculation made. I don't recall the exact percentages. I can get that to you before you need to vote on it. But the benefit cuts that the employees accepted, combined with the variation in the city contribution and the increase over 7% was actuarially calculated. We then took those calculations, ran it by the city legal department, and reached the conclusion that we were within the requirements of the city ordinance requiring substantially equal contributions to the pension fund. So yes, that was in fact specifically addressed, considered, analyzed with actuarial support.
And then just a couple final areas of questioning is in terms of the existing employees, the rule of 80 is changed to what?
Rule of 85.
And for those who may not know what the rule of 85 will mean, would you explain that just very briefly?
Yeah, the rule of 80, the current rule, changing to the rule of 85 essentially means your age plus your years of service must equal that number.
And so now with the rule of 85, your age plus your years of service must equal 85, correct?
Exactly correct.
Current employees who remain then and currently have 2.25% of salary contributed towards their pension will have that adjusted to what?
1.9%,
okay.
Which is essentially a 15% cut in the value of that accrual.
And in terms of the cash balance plan, people who are hired to work for the city on or after March 1 or thereabouts, subject to whatever the final amendment of the whole says, but roughly March. What is the floor guarantee in terms of percent that they're going to assume that they can rely on for their retirement planning?
It's a very good question, and it's going to require a little bit of elaboration because the cash balance plan works entirely differently than the current defined benefit pension plan. The current defined benefit pension plan, you have a multiplier, what used to be 2.25% times final average compensation times years of service. That's how the pension benefit was calculated. And that 2.25% was reduced to 1.9% for years in the future. Under the cash balance plan, the way an employee's retirement benefit increases is through annual pay credits combined with annual interest credits. So the pay credits range between 13 and 16% per year, bearing in mind that an employee is contributing out of their own earnings roughly 11%, slightly below 11% per year. In addition, the floor, as you referred to it, refers to an interest credit, a return on investment, much like you might see in a 401k plan, and the floor that we negotiated is 4%. So each year, an employee's, and in a cash balance plan, every employee has a notional account. Their retirement funds are commingled with the existing fund, but they're monitored on an individual basis so that every year the city will be able to identify and publish for each employee participant in a cash balance plan how much money is in their individual account, growing each year through pay credits, growing each year through interest credits.
Now, as I understand it, there's a floating average that you're going to use in terms of determining the contribution for the credits.
That's exactly correct.
So you don't look at 1 year snapshot and say how we did. It's done over a period of time.
That's exactly.
Could you explain that for a minute?
Sure. We wanted to avoid scenarios like the country experienced in 2008 with a rapid decline in the stock market and investment assets. So we negotiated an interest credit that was driven by 5-year averages. Now, bear in mind, we have a 4% floor, so every year we're committed to a 4% contribution, interest contribution on an employee's retirement accounts. It can grow higher than that based upon 5-year averages on returns on investment. So the way we've set this thing up is if the 5-year average exceeds 7% actual return on investment, actual performance in the market, then the employee recovers 3/4 of that excess in excess of 7%. And for the
Is
first...
it retro? So, for example,
No.
the employees who start March 1, what happens March 1 of 2020?
Well, we're going to have to look back retro even before the cash balance plan was put into place to determine what the actual return on investment has been over the previous 5 years. And then each year we'll look back 5 years and determine whether there's any additional interest credit due beyond the 4%. And there won't be unless that 5-year average is in excess of 7% each year. So to the extent, for example, that the investment return is, let's say, 6%, the employee is only receiving 4% of that on an interest credit. That excess goes to fund the unfunded liability.
Okay, well, I want to thank you for your, as well as the representatives from Local 251 and Steve for the work you've done in terms of having handed this off from the former Labor Negotiations Committee. There's 2 of us who were on that committee, the President, Mr. Festerson, and me, that remain, but the Mayor was on the committee too, and we did enjoy a little bit of extra briefings, but I wanted to congratulate you and thank you for the time you took to include the whole council and the regular updates. and for the work that you did in getting to this point. Just as I understand it, this passed unanimously at the Personnel Board, or is it not there yet?
It already has, yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I had a couple of follow-ups to Councilman Jeremy asked many of the same questions I was going to ask, but I had a couple more specific items on one or two of them. One of which is that amendment of the whole, and these may be best answered by you or Mr. Kratz or even Mr. Curtis, I think. But so the amendment of the whole, in effect, will only change the start date of this contract, which is March 1st instead of January 1st.
It doesn't change the start date of the contract, changes the effective date of the pension
Okay.
change.
And one thing we've learned is that the fine print on these contracts are very important. And so the contract language is not changing, but it's an amendment to the ordinance that adopts the contract. And I understand there might be an MOU of some nature before then, too, that solidifies both sides saying they agree to that. I just want to make sure that we think that's adequate from a ordinance, city ordinance, and from a contractual perspective, that makes it very clear that's the start date for the pension. Do you agree with that? It's adequate?
Yeah, I would defer to Mr. Kratz on that issue, but if you're asking for my opinion, yes, I believe that is adequate, and I believe that that is a welcome evolution from the employee perspective, and one that would be recognized by the collective bargaining representatives as designed to ease the discomfort, primarily psychological. Doesn't really have a practical financial impact, but this is a gigantic change for employees to get used to, and we didn't want them to feel like they were backed into a corner on short notice trying to figure out whether they were going to retire or not.
Yeah, and I agree with all that. I just want to make sure we're covering all our bases here for the unforeseen. Mr. Kratz, do you agree with that statement, too, that those would be adequate measures to make that date certain?
Paul Kratz, City Attorney, yes, I do. I agree with Mr. McQueen.
Great. Thank you. One question he also asked was, and that you discussed, was the EEO, or non-discrimination terminology. It does add sexual orientation in this contract, but it does not add gender identity, which was part of the city's non-discrimination ordinance adopted a few years ago. I guess my question is either to you or Mr. Kratz that we think that's still adequate, and the city ordinance itself would supersede that language and provide that protection to everyone who's included in that EEO ordinance, correct?
Well, once again, I'll defer to Mr. Kratz on that. If you're asking for my personal opinion, the city cannot ignore its legal obligations required by ordinance simply because it's not specifically mentioned in a contract. Minimum wage might be another typical example. The contract may provide for wages, but if it didn't for some reason, that doesn't mean the city's free to pay whatever minimum wage it chooses to pay. There are legal obligations outside of a contract that stand independent and are just as compelling as a contract might be.
Mr. Kratz, do you agree that that's covered by the previously adopted city ordinance?
Paul Kratz, City Attorney, yes, the ordinance will prevail.
Okay, thank you. And then I also wanted to ask, and you started to go there just for those that are watching, so because it is a complicated thing to understand, the cash balance system and the conversion to that. There was a lot of discussion and concern expressed by some in the public and some on the council during the last round of negotiations about the pension systems themselves, assuming an 8% rate of return over a long period of time to balance these funds over time. And what you've said in a bit of a roundabout way is that the cash balance plan provides some protection against that risk because it's guaranteeing a 4% return to employees, but doesn't guarantee anything up and above that. Do you want to expand upon that just for a minute, just so that's clear to everybody who's interested?
Yeah, I mean, the starting point for that discussion is an actuarial assumption that the pension fund as a whole is going to generate annual returns of 8%. The public perception of that is oftentimes shaded by their experience in 401k type plans, private investment type of plans, where an 8% return on investment seems awfully high, and some would say unrealistically high. The fact of the matter is, if you look at history for this particular plan, and how the funds are invested, 8% is a very reliable number, a number that has been not recommended by the mayor or the city council or anybody with a vested interest in these particular negotiations, but rather by outside investment counsel and approved by the trustees who are charged with the responsibility for protecting the integrity of the plan. So actuarially, the assumption has always been that the plan would generate 8% return on investments. In this particular cash balance plan design, we did not use that 8% as a basis for rewarding benefits. Instead, we selected a much lower, in fact, 50% lower guaranteed return on investment in the form of annual interest credits. And if you look historically at the plan, the number of years individually by which the plan generated a return of investment of less than 4% is very small statistically. And we also selected, as Councilman Jerem pointed out earlier, a 5-year average on returns on investment for purposes of determining whether an interest credit should exceed 4% or not. The bottom line here is employees, through their interest credits, share with the city investment risk. It's not a popular function or attribute from an employee perspective because they like the assurance of knowing that the city is going to make contributions to their pension plan. We changed that dynamic with this plan, and we didn't make it risk-proof. There's still a 4% guarantee, but what we did was insulate the city from the type of market volatility that has historically plagued the city's pension fund. And again, much to the credit of the employees who stepped up and did something innovative here along with the city's negotiators.
Thank you. So in essence, the pension boards and their advisors still recommend the 8% return. And in fact, that was exceeded in the last year or two. But
nearly doubled, actually.
Yeah, given the market. But the point is, the cash balance provides insulation against that risk going forward.
Exactly correct.
And in effect, by changing the rule of 80 that was talked about in the minimum retirement age to the rule of 85 and the 10-year vesting periods, in effect, we're raising the practical retirement age probably to 65, aren't we?
We are. And normal retirement for current employees moves to age 65. Now, we grandfathered employees who were close to retirement, but those that are not close to retirement are going to have to work to age 65 rather than the current minimum or normal retirement age of age 60. The 10-year vesting requirement doesn't apply to current employees. They remain on a 5-year vesting program. The 10-year vesting requirement applies to new employees who will participate in the cash balance pension plan. And incidentally, a 10-year vesting wait is a very long time and very atypical even in a 401k type of plan. So what happens here is employees have got to make a substantial investment in the city before they reap the benefit of any pension contributions that come from the city into their notional account.
Mm-hmm. Retirement age was also a big topic of our last discussions on these contracts, so I wanted to make that clear as well. Just a couple of questions on the financial aspects of this. So you mentioned the one-time salary supplement, the 1%. And I think in our discussions in Finance Committee, Mr. Curtis, my recollection is that was about a $600,000 or $700,000 impact to the general fund that was going to be encumbered in 2014 to pay off that obligation if the contract's approved. Was that in fact encumbered by the end of the year, or is that still the intention?
It may still be the intention, but remember we have the wage adjustment account, which will be the place where we get most of the funding for this, which should include the amount for 14. But to the extent that anything is still required and not yet used, it would be encumbered from that account, yes.
Okay, you still have that ability even though it's January?
Yeah, we'll encumber up for another couple of months.
Okay, thank you. And all other costs, we've talked about the wage increases, the city supplement, this 1% increase to the salary, and the city's increased contribution to the pension system are all budgeted in these years and accounted for, right?
Can you, Steve Curtis, can you repeat that, please?
Yeah. All the anticipated costs represented in this contract, the wage increases, the one-time salary supplement, and the city's increased contribution to the pension system, all are budgeted in 2015 and/or had set asides in previous years and are within our budget at the moment.
Yeah, if you remember, all that was captured in 15, still in wage adjustment, but with the intention that it would be moved to the proper places in the accounting system when the contract was finished.
Okay. Will there need to be any action items on that comes to the council, or is that something that just can be done administratively?
I think other than what you will see here, I believe we will have some other documents to come before you to officially move. When you see the documents that approve the pay changes, there will be a few other documents that come before you.
Okay. That make those transfers?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I think the last thing I had was to Mr. McQueen, were there any other substantive contractual changes that are non-wage or non-pension related that we should be aware of that we haven't discussed yet here today?
You know, Pete, there are a number of language-related changes that I wouldn't characterize as significant enough to burden the city council with through a discussion. I think all of those show up in the ordinance or in the contract drafts that you may have seen previously. You know, it would include things like the establishment of a wellness program, voluntary wellness program. We modified, for example, the time period by which employees could use vacation in order to avoid losing vacation. Lots of kind of nitnoid details like that, most of them with operational implications, but little or no economic implications. The only one that I can think of off the top of my head with any degree of economic implications is we changed some of the clothing allowances for uniform reimbursement or cleaning reimbursement, those sorts of things, but they're pretty de minimis in scope and nature.
Okay. Thank you. That's all I have. Any further lights? I don't see any. Public hearing's closed. Thank you.
Douglas County Election Commissioner transmits the official results of the City of Omaha November 4th Charter Amendment election.
Roll call.
Milton. Yes. Pauls. Yes. Thompson. Yes. Gurnett. Yes. Gray. Yes. Jerem. Yes. Mr. President.
Yes.
Placed on file 7-0. Pursuant to City Council Rules 7-8, the third reading and public hearing. Agenda items number 50 through 55 shall be held January 27th. Pursuant to City Council Rule 7C, the public hearing agenda items 56 through 62 shall be held on the second reading.
Roll call.
Milton. Yes. Pauls. Yes. Thompson. Yes. Gurnett. Yes. Gray. Yes. Jerem. Mr. President.
Yes.
3:17. We are adjourned.
Sea to shining sea.